Episode 134, Apostate, Joe Lloyd Johnson. This is Matthew, and in this episode of Still Unbelievable, I chat with Joe, one of the contributors of the book Apostate, Stories of Deconversion. Joe is already an author and has written her own memoir of deconstruction. See the show notes for links. Listeners, please be aware that this conversation touches on sexual violence, and that we start discussing it in the opening minutes. But it is not all we talk about. We cover other topics as well. Jo's book does talk about her experience of sexual violence, and proceeds from her book go to the fantastic charity Louder Than Silence. See show notes for links. Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Still Unbelievable. Did you know that I've written a chapter for a book? What do you mean you've not heard any of the last episodes that I've been doing, plugging that that awesome book, Apostate, Stories of Deconversion? 21 authors have got together to write 21 chapters telling their story out of Christianity, and I've written one of them. I've done a couple of interviews. If you haven't heard any of them, I have a back catalogue. Please go and listen to those. But while you're getting ready for that, enjoy this one. I'm sure this one will be fantastic because I am a fortune teller. So I'm welcoming Jo. Jo's written a glorious chapter for Apostate Book. She and I will be having a chat for however long it takes. Thank you so much, Jo. You are probably the only contributor to this book who actually, no, let me start again. You're probably the only contributing author to this book who has written your own book first. But Sarah, who put it all together, who organised all of this, she's written her own book, even though she hasn't written a chapter for the book. So welcome to a unique club, Jo, and welcome to Still Unbelievable. I'm looking forward to having a chat with you.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to talking. I'm excited. I read your chapter preparing for this, and I was pleasantly surprised at how many overlaps there were between your life story and some of the things that I talk about in my actual book. So you've only read my chapter in Apostate. So some of these similarities will be news to you.
Okay, interesting. I am looking forward to that. So let's talk a little bit about your book first then. Your book is called Silenced in Eden. You tell a story about that. So as I have not had the opportunity to read it yet, please tell my listeners about the book.
Yeah, so Silence in Eden is a memoir, so it's all my true life story. I also was raised with Christian parents. Instead of them being missionaries out of country, they were pastors. Actually, my grandparents were pastors, and they created a small commune in California. So that same feeling of kind of being detached from the outside world, definitely can relate to that. And I also have a very interesting story around spiritual experience that yours resonated with mine. But the book I started writing while I was actively deconstructing. I didn't know it would turn into deconverting. When I published the book, I don't think I was fully there yet. So it's more of a deconstruction story, but it kind of parallels my upbringing and then figuring out how to parent, and how sometimes trying to figure out how to parent affects, you start to see like, wait, why did my parents do that? Because I don't feel comfortable doing that. And how did, like, one thing I talk about in my chapter is spanking. And that was something that my parents did. So something I assumed I would do. And when you then are enacting the things that your parents did, you're like, I don't know if I actually think this is the best. And you can also start to think, like, how did this affect me? Some of the negative effects. So that's like one example of multiple topics that I bring up in the book. One thing about the book is I am a victim of sexual violence as a child. It is talked about in the book. So something for readers to be aware of. That's something you have to be comfortable with. I do not get into explicit details. It is not there's no point to traumatize or to trigger people, but sadly, it is something that many people have experienced. And as a survivor, I wanted to be honest about that experience and let others know that they're not the only ones who have also possibly experienced that. For me, the abuse as a child and being raised in purity culture, and then leaving I kind of had to unravel all of that at the same time. So that is why they're very interlinked for me, because my memories were repressed. So I did not know all the specifics. And as I kind of dug at how I was raised, those memories kind of came to the surface. So I had to deal with both situations at the same time.
Interesting what you say about memories to the surface. One of the weird things that I've experienced over the last month writing my chapter, because we've hit the topic of sexual violence, so let's go there briefly. This will be a few minutes of talking about female sexual violence, listeners, so please do be aware. And I'm sorry that I've done it so early in the episode, but it's a thing, so let's not hide that. Because I make an oblique reference to sexual violence in my own chapter. And yes, I know I'm a man. Yes, I know I'm not a victim of sexual violence. But there is an emotional link when you've got that deep family connection to somebody who has been a victim of it. And yes, I'm a stereotypical white soppy male, so just deal with it. But I sobbed reading my chapter again. And those are my own words. I've written it, I've edited it, I've read it multiple times over the last 6 months as we've been doing this book. And yet those words that I know so well still brought me to sobbing tears. And if that can do to me, let's just imagine that that's only a fraction of what a woman has to deal with.
One thing that did stick out with your chapter was that the fact you talked about reading your mom's firsthand account. The reason that I started writing my book was because my grandma had passed away, and I found out there were things about her life I never learned. I didn't know. She never told me. And I thought, well, if I died right now, my daughters would have no idea what I have experienced. And so in a way, writing this book was a firsthand account for them to be able to read if I didn't have the chance to share with them. So there was a little bit of that for me reading the way that you ended up hearing your mom's story. I was grieved that you weren't able to have the sit down conversation with her that I have started to try to sprinkle into life with my kids so that the topic's not off the table and they know that mom experienced this and it's okay to ask questions and it's okay to talk about these things because our society doesn't know how to talk about the things that are ugly and scary. And as a woman so one of the things about the book is that $1 for every sale goes to Louder Than Silence, which is an organization that is a nonprofit it's a nonprofit that works with victims of sexual violence. And actually, since publishing the book, I first found Louder Than Silence as a participant and have been volunteering with them and ended up getting hired. So actually, that is what I do now part-time, is I work with Louder Than Silence. And as I dig into the topic of sexual violence and what victims have gone through, how it affects the brain, I've also learned that when it comes to childhood victims, there are a lot of male survivors. And it is something that we don't talk about as a society, but boys have been victimized a lot more often than we like to realize.
Okay, thank you for that, Joan. Just a reminder, there is a link in the show notes to Louder Than Silence, as well as somewhere to buy Jo's book. So please, if you have any sympathy for any of that topic, please do go and visit the website, support Louder Than Silence, buy Jo's book so you can support them twice. And it is an essential project, an essential work. I didn't know of the organisation, but I've been around the website since Jo and I arranged this interview, and I'm very impressed with the organisation. But my validation doesn't count, Jo's does. So thank you for that, Jo. I resonated with your chapter right from the very opening of your chapter, because your chapter opens with a very raw dialogue about spanking. And I'm pretty sure that there are many parents who read that chapter will have the same reaction that I had reading it, was, wow, that seems so familiar. My daughter's 20 now. We did have, when Sarah and I were still learning to be parents, when she was still very young, I spanked her once and I briefly got her attention, and I tried it a second time, and it was very clear the second time that this was not going to work as a method of punishment. And I felt wretched. And Sarah and I had a very frank conversation that day, and we didn't spank again after that. It was awful. And I was spanked as a child. I heard the whole "this hurts you more than me" speech, which is in itself so damaging. And I'm pretty sure that that first experience of spanking my daughter hurt me more than it did her. And it hurt me so much, it never happened again.
Well, I'm glad that it was only once, maybe twice for you. I think I still have a little bit of guilt from it taking so long. I don't remember exactly how many years, but it got to the point where my daughter would, like, whatever tantrum she was being disciplined for wasn't as bad as the emotional upset from being spanked. Like, wait, if we're correcting her for a 10-minute flip out and then it takes 45 minutes to calm her down, like, this isn't actually helping anybody.
No.
So yeah, and for me, as I've dug into therapy and stuff, I've realized that some of my self-harm ideation has actually come from spanking, because I was trained that my body is bad, and that if I do anything wrong or make a mistake, that I deserve physical pain. And so I will have the mental urge to cause physical pain, even though I'm like, no, I don't want to hurt myself. So I definitely think spanking can lead to mental health issues. And I'm really glad that I didn't spank all my kids. I have 5 children, so I feel bad that my daughter was the guinea pig of us figuring our crap out. But I do talk in my book, Silenced in Eden, about how at least as she's a teenager now, I am opening the doors to have conversations around, like, Mom didn't do it right. Mom tried her best. And hoping that as her brain is still growing, I can do better now. I can't go back and fix it, right?
No, that's right. That's great to hear. And I took a similar tactic, my wife and I both took a similar tactic with our daughter. She's 20 now. So I'm a parent of an adult. I don't know how that happened. I don't know how I managed to achieve that. But I have, and we have good conversations, and I've had similar conversations with her multiple times, apologized my own failings. She's been very gracious in her responses to those, and we've joked about she'll get her own opportunity to traumatize a youngster in her own time. But it means that we've actually built a healthy relationship where we can talk these things through, which is far better than either of her parents have with their respective parents, which is the way it should be. We should be improving with each generation, not maintaining trauma and maintaining badness. So I'm really pleased that we've managed to achieve that. And I look forward to the future with her.
It is nice when your kids hit that switch where you start to enjoy them and respect them as their own humans.
Yeah.
It can be fun. My oldest is only 14, but I've already seen a lot of their personalities. And I do, that is a theme of Silence in Eden, where I talk about kind of learning from their innocence. And like, I was indoctrinated so young that I think some of those pure natural things kind of get shifted out of you so young, when you don't kind of smush your kid into a box. They kind of grow out however they want to. And then I think that they can kind of teach you things. So I do feel like my children have taught me a lot.
If you don't learn from being a parent to children, you are clearly parenting wrong, is my opinion on that.
I definitely agree with that.
The other thing that I say is, I'm probably an older parent than average. I'm 35 years older than my child. A lot of parents have got a smaller age gap to their children. And I'm quite happy to say that if I'd been a parent in my 20s, I'd have been a monumentally shit parent. And I'm glad I'm a parent that's older, because I am better for it. I'm still not perfect, don't misunderstand me, but I'm better than I would have been.
Yeah, I was 23 when I became a mom. And I think one part of my story is that being a female in fundamental Christianity, there is a lot of push to be submissive, to be like, your role is a lot about what you can do for men. And being a mother is like the crown jewels. Like, that is what your goal is supposed to be. The supporting role, make your man look good, and then raise nice children to go along with it. So I really, being that young, like, my goal growing up was like to find the right guy and then to have children. And so it's been interesting to be like, oh, but I'm still my own person. What does that look like?
Yeah.
I don't need to just shift into mom and wife. I get to be Joe. And who is Joe? And it is interesting being 30. I'm 38, but it started at like 30, being like, who am I? I've never learned.
It's interesting you say that, because I don't know when it happened or whatever, because I have no conscious thought of thinking differently. But here I am, here now as a man, the idea of a submissive wife who every waking moment is an attempt to make me look good or to please me. It might sound good in a fantasy comic, but I find the thought of that, frankly, deeply unattractive.
Mm-hmm.
So I do wonder what sort of man exists who finds that attractive and likes that.
Oh, I personally think that the draw of narcissistic men to Christianity, it has some of that to it. I think a narcissist would really love a submissive, shut up, make me look good, pamper my ego type of a situation. I don't think that that's a healthy situation to want.
Yeah, and unfulfilling as well, frankly. Yeah, there is no way to describe that kind of relationship that I am attracted to, and I don't get it. And maybe that's a me thing. But I guess academically I need to understand it, so I know what I'm criticizing. But as a man human sitting here, I don't find that kind of person or relationship attractive to me. And I'm glad I'm not married to somebody like that.
Yeah,
I'm glad I'm married to somebody who's not like that.
Yeah, I really do feel like it has to do with the narcissist who wants somebody who is just there to make them feel good and doesn't want the challenge of like the biblical iron sharpening iron. They don't want that. They want somebody who gives them attention. And to me, that just sounds shallow, and I'm not interested in it.
No, absolutely not. Let's get on to your chapter then, and we'll obviously be picking bits from your book. So you mentioned earlier that you grew up and you were indoctrinated from a very young age. Where was that, and what was the environment it was in?
Yeah, so my grandparents started a commune. We lived there till my grandpa passed away when I was 4. He was the leader, so it kind of fell apart. I think we moved out of the commune when I was like 6. I remember praying the prayer of salvation at 5. I remember not knowing if I did it right, so I would pray it every night for like a month or 2. I also remember having the anxious thought of, well, if I ask Jesus in my heart, but sin separates me from him, then if I did anything wrong that day, does that mean he ran away from my heart? So anxiety at 5, probably not the best, but that's just where my parents have always held to the very fundamental, the idea that Adam and Eve are real live people, that the story is literal, that every part of the Bible is literal, that every single word is properly translated. I don't remember the obsession with New King James, but I do remember that in like Calvary Chapel, when we started going to a Calvary Chapel, it was very much like, this Bible is better than that Bible, and you better quote from King James instead. And then when I was 16, I found a charismatic church. That's actually where my husband and I met. This is all in California of the USA. And the charismatic church was very similar to my grandparents' church. My grandma used to say she saw angels. They believed in prophetic words. And that was why the section where you share about your like deliverance resonated. I remember people falling down in services. I actually did a missions trip and had a woman fall down to me touching her. So I was like, yeah, that's normal. I know that. And one thing that for me happened, and I did talk about this in Silenced in Eden, is that I got baptized with the Holy Spirit, which means you speak in tongues. And shortly after I had that occur, I was in a prayer service and was speaking in tongues. And that was when I had my first flashback of the abuse that happened when I was a child.
Wow.
And at that point in time, I had no memory that anything had happened to me. And the thing with flashbacks is that they're not clear. Like, you don't have like clarity of like all the things that happened. It's just like a terrible, fearful memory, kind of like flashing, like thunder, where you see an image, but you don't really know what you're seeing. And so as I deconstructed, I was looking into like, what is speaking in tongues? How do I explain that? Kind of like you were saying with the sleep paralysis, where you're like, wait, there's a scientific explanation. This is amazing. So I found that they've done scientific brain scans of people speaking in tongues, and that what happens to your brain is very similar to hypnosis. And one thing that therapy has tried to do before is to bring up memories that were repressed through hypnosis. So it's like, oh, well, then that makes a lot of sense.
What a connection. Wow.
And the thing that's kind of crazy there is like, we're opening Christians, charismatic Christians are kind of opening this pathway, if you want to call it, in your brain where stuff like traumatic memories can come, stuff like your body seizing and all these things, but we really they don't have the scientific awareness or therapeutic awareness to know like what to do once we've tapped someone into a memory or an experience. They don't have a way of navigating that except for to like spiritually bypass whatever trauma they're bringing up, which is what ended up happening with my experience. So I had a flashback. I had full-blown PTSD where I couldn't sleep for 2 months because if I closed my eyes, I would have that flashback.
So once it had happened, it was now in your conscious thought and you just couldn't get rid of it.
Yes. And it was very PTSD and I had severe anxiety. I couldn't calm my body down. And I still didn't have the knowledge of what was coming up exactly. I just knew that I was a child. I knew it was fear. I knew that it had some sexual connotation.
Right. And remind me, what age were you when this happened?
So the abuse happened when I was 6, but the
flashback, yeah.
The flashback, I was like 16 or 17.
Okay. So quite a delicate age anyway. So that's a really shitty time to have that kind of experience.
Yeah, and it was really terrible. And I was a very independent teenager. At that point, I had my own car. I was driving myself around. I was keeping my own schedule. And I didn't have the relationship with my parents to like tell them like, oh, hey, all of a sudden I'm not sleeping at night. And what ended up happening is that I had another spiritual experience where they did an altar call and I came to the altar and someone prayed over me and it like calmed that PTSD activation. And so, of course, then I'm like, oh, well, now I'm healed and it's all better. And it went away because I could finally sleep at night. But really what happened was that I just spiritually bypassed and didn't really deal with any of the stuff that was bubbling up until another 14 years later at 30, when I was like, hey, I still have issues. Maybe I should figure out what the hell really went on when I was a kid. And maybe I should actually like go to therapy or deal with it a little bit better.
Right. Okay. I'm going to obviously cut this because I really don't know where to go next week. So I don't want to dwell on the trauma, but it's clearly an important part of your story. I guess the question I want to ask then is, who was there to help you through this? What was it that helped you, or who was it that helped you to get to grips with what was going on if you didn't have that relationship with your parents?
Yeah, so that was the thing is my only other safe situation was I had a best friend who helped, but I also just very much leaned into Christianity. Right. I just prayed and prayed, Lord, take it away.
Because you'd had that calming experience in a prayer scenario. So that sort of like drags you into Christianity as a result of that.
Yeah, I mean, my whole identity was Christianity. And so it definitely had the like, well, God's going to save me. That's my only option. And I think that's why my brain, like that is what my brain decided had to happen, was I had to have another spiritual experience. I had to calm myself down. And I do think there is a level of, like you say with the your situation where you say that when people have the sleep paralysis, a lot of times they assume whatever spiritual understanding they have, they apply to it, right? Yes. And so that was very much what happened for me, is that I just like used my spirituality to kind of make a narrative that would calm my brain down. And I think that speaks to how intelligent we are as a human species, that when faced with trauma, repression itself is a way of dealing with it. Over spiritualizing it is a way to deal with it. And so I do feel like Christianity and certain things can be this nice little crutch that we take. And I did, in your chapter, you talk about kind of like losing how you wanted to be a Christian, right? You wanted that relationship to stay. Yeah. I definitely relate to that. You use the word a bereavement. Yeah. I actually, if you're okay with it, I would love to read one little section.
Okay. Yeah. Go for it.
Because I feel like it will resonate with you. Losing your religion is like a death in the family. The closer you are to the family member, the greater you are affected by the loss. No one will tell you it is all your fault or you chose this when you are grieving a death. But many will respond this way when your religion dies. These religious do-gooders try to shame you into repentance, or like a firing squad in a hurricane. You need shelter, not firepower. You need a home-cooked meal and loving company. A sermon is not required. You already know all the Bible verses they are quoting. If your community was your church family and your family is all churched, you may be mourning 100 deaths. Every friendship may collapse. Every family tie may loosen. It may just be you and all your questions by the end.
That's beautiful, Joe. I absolutely resonate with that. I'm going to need to read your book. Listeners, go buy Joe's book. You're supporting Louder Than Silence. You're also supporting indirectly Apostate. But while you're buying Joe's book, buy Apostate as well. Help us both. Help us twice. It'll be very, very cool. Thank you, Jo. I'm really pleased that you read that.
Yes, thank you for letting me share that little bit. Yeah, reading Apostate has been great because it is, like I said, reading parts of your story. I was like, oh, that reminds me of my story. Clearly, we both understand that feeling of something being gone that you don't really want to be gone. Like you maybe took steps to question it or look at it, but your curiosity was not hoping that it would go away. No. Like at no point did I want that relationship with God to end.
No.
I just wanted to understand why hell didn't seem like it was a real place in the Bible. Yeah. I just had these questions that came up, or for me, the gender bias and the submissive place of a woman. I just got to the point where I was like, I don't want my daughters to think that that's normal. And I don't think that that's great that I feel like that's normal. But at no point was I like, I wasn't angry with God either. Like I wasn't like mad at him. I was like, this just doesn't feel like these two pieces, like the God of the Old Testament, or even like the Bible didn't seem like it all fit together. There are certain stories that oppress women. And then there's Jesus who like, it looks like he had disciples that were women, and wait, not all this shit doesn't fit together. This is really confusing.
Yeah. Yes, it does. Just going briefly back to the whole bereavement thing. I've tried with a couple of Christians to explain to them how difficult that process is and how much like a bereavement it is, and how daily, even hourly, it is just a drain on your mind. And I've yet to find a way to actually adequately express it to a Christian. It's either my failure to adequately express it in the right language, or something about Christianity that protects them from understanding what's being said. Have you managed to have a successful conversation with a believer about expressing just how rough that experience is?
I can't think of one. Not with somebody who wasn't already on the path of like deconstructing, who feared that they would end up there.
Right.
I've had conversations with people who were, maybe something was going on that they were angry with God, and but they were angry and still hoping that there was a God, and they could understand the concept of that relationship being severed or gone or evaporating. But no, somebody who's still clinging. And I think that the cognitive dissonance is like, you can't, it's unpenetrable at that point in my mind.
That is what I'm wondering. I'm trying to find evidence that is not true, but that is what I'm thinking. Listeners, if you're an atheist, you've had a conversation with a Christian successfully on this matter. If you're a Christian and you do understand this matter, the email address, reasonpress@gmail.com, please, because I think this is something important. This is an area where those of us who have left Christianity can actually positively impact the way Christians think about us, if we can find a way to actually break through and adequately explain what this process is like. Jo, the other thing that you're moving on to then, Jo, is how the experience of a woman was negative. And I've said this multiple times, and I'm not going to stop saying it. I have learned to appreciate how much harder it is, how much the experience of both Christianity and exiting Christianity is for people who are not white cis males. And as a white cis male, I am at the least troubled end of that spectrum. I'm not saying it's easy for me. I'm saying I have it easier than everybody else. And I've only begun to appreciate that as an adult, as part of my exit from Christianity. And I do want to keep beating that drum. I think it is important that people like me do acknowledge that. So what are some of the examples that you can immediately give then that make the Christian experience harder for women specifically?
So it starts with Genesis, right? Who do we blame as the beginning of all sin? it's the female. We are deemed the weaker of the sexes. There's also the idea that Adam is made for God. God wants a companion, so he makes Adam. But then Adam wants a companion and he makes woman. So right off the bat, we are secondary.
Mm.
And that's like, that's the entire, I mean, that's how you feel as a woman. You feel it in your bones that you are secondary. Your needs are secondary. Your desires are secondary. Everything that is you comes after the men. And then I talk a lot in my book about purity culture and how that also makes women the stumbling blocks. So we're not just weaker, we are the problem.
Yeah. Yes, I am aware of that.
And as somebody who's experienced sexual violence, your body is a problem. Your existence is a problem. You feel like you are bad.
Okay. And because it's topical, and forgive me for going there, but how does the current political situation in America, where Christians have overwhelmingly supported putting a rapist into the White House, how does that affect women in situations like you?
The victim blaming that my culture allows and promotes is horrendous. I mean, how many reports, how many victims have come forward that somehow get paid off or somehow get silenced? It's just, I don't understand how Christians can live with themselves and preach morality and then also promote somebody who has no morals. It's stomach turning. And then there's also, it can be scary because there's talk of like, I don't know where we're going to go from here, but I definitely think that as a woman, also for any other minorities, there's probably a extreme amount of fear of like, I mean, we don't even have birth control right now. Like, really? Okay. Women's rights are being actively taken away. I personally know people who are like afraid of being sexually active because if they needed a way out, there would be no way out. Okay. And that also is.
So you saying that has given me flashback to some of the things that flashback is the wrong phrase to use there. It's given me memories of some conversations I've had on certain social media places where extreme right-wing Christians would see what you've just said about access to contraception as a good thing because look at what it's doing. It's forcing people to behave themselves. Therefore, it's a good thing.
Yes, but the thing is that most people won't actually behave themselves. Yeah. If that's what you want to quote call it, is behaving. What really ends up happening is more harm. People who need the resources that are not given them, they also have the people with money can just go to a state. They can just drive or fly to a state and get the things they need. And the poor have no option because they don't have the finances to take a week off and drive themselves to a different state and get the things that they need. I think that part of all of that actually affects the classism where we want to keep the poor, keep the poor quiet.
And let's be brutally carnal about this. Refusing access to contraception to a woman might make her rethink some of her activities, but all that does is that denies a violent man his outlet, and so he's going to take it, and then suddenly the woman loses twice.
Yes, absolutely, and in those domestic violence is on the rise when culture turns this way. If you make it where a woman has no way out, then she's stuck in her abusive relationship. And if you're pregnant with that man's child and you have no way of, you have no resources to get out, like you said, you're hurt twice. You're doubly affected by these type of situations.
Now they plan to hurt her again by making it harder to get a divorce. So now these women are doubly stuck in their abusive relationship. So there is no good way to spin this kind of shit.
No, there's not. And the thing is that usually then resources for those other resources start to get cut too. Like, we don't just start taking women's rights away, but they're actually starting to cut other resources for minorities that, we need those. That is how there's a reason why the poor need help. It's because they don't have the ability to, and you and I both know the generational things, right? So like if you are talking about multiple generations of poor people, we're talking also people who like are ex-slaves only how many generations ago? Like they're starting from nothing. And then we don't acknowledge like, oh no, the white man who came over from Europe with thousands and hundreds and all of the money and all the power, maybe there's an unequalness here.
Yeah, it is. And on that pleasant note, I will switch tack a little bit, listeners, but these are serious topics. I'm not making light of these topics, but you do want to hear other things discussed in this episode. So, Joe, I'd like to take you back to the beginning. You mentioned 20 minutes ago, however long ago it was, about growing up in a commune in California. So just paint a little picture about what that was like. Would you have called it a cult, or is it still just Christians wanting to do things their way? And what memories, if at all, do you have of that place?
I was young when it fell apart. My parents always just called it the property. So we all like, it was just a plot of land, a property that multiple homes were on. I would now call it a cult, but it took a long time of looking at it before I would be ready to claim that. The cultness of we know better, we're doing it the right way, us and them, of like, well, we're the real Christians and those are like lesser Christians. All of that was definitely there. But at 4 years old, like I wouldn't have known that. Yeah. I just knew that all my friends were the people who went to the church and that the church also had its own school. And this was our little bubble in our own little world. And we didn't really talk to anybody outside of our bubble. I have great memories of being a little kid running around outside with very little parental vision and being able to, all my friends lived there. We were all just a bunch of kids hanging out. So that seemed great. So some of my memories are wonderful. But then as I get older, I see the like, oh, but my relationship with my mom and dad was kind of weird because I was also like in a room with other people's kids who weren't with my mom and dad. So it was kind of confusing if auntie can spank me and dad can spank me, like who's my parent here? Yeah. So it was interesting. It definitely blurs the lines of family. The leader definitely becomes kind of dad to all. My grandma was kind of everyone's mom. And it also set my parents up for failure in that when it fell apart, neither one had education. Neither one had a savings because everyone's money was compiled together. No one had land because the church owned the land. So I can't imagine being, I think they were like 35 with 4 kids and having nothing. They had no. Rough. Yeah. So I definitely have sympathy for my parents. I have sympathy for their own indoctrination and their own limited resources.
And that's very gracious of you to acknowledge that, because they are also victims. They didn't know better. And in their victimization, they victimized you as well because they just carried on. So hallelujah to those of us who managed to break the cycle.
Yes.
So going back to your chapter then, your chapter dwells a lot on your time in Hawaii. So you were obviously married by then. So fast forward a couple of years, sketch it out. How did you end up in Hawaii? And tell me it was more than just the beaches and the exotic canoeing that got you there.
I mean, the beach is amazing, so why not? But my parents actually had a situation where my dad got offered a job in Hawaii. My dad's a surfer, my husband's a surfer. So as soon as my parents moved, my husband wanted an excuse to get to Hawaii because that's where the surf is.
Right.
So he ended up finding a job. And so it really was wanting to be by family, but also by the beach that sent us to Hawaii. But when we got to Hawaii, my husband and I had this belief that we were supposed to be pastors. So part of our indoctrination was this idea of like God's purpose for your life, that God has this specific calling on you. And we believed that we were supposed to be pastors. So when we got to Hawaii, it seemed like God was putting that in front of our path finally, and we were going to achieve the ultimate calling on our lives. And it was oddly in that actually coming close to fruition or being presented to us that we both started having the bigger questions and being like, wait, do we want that? Are we comfortable with what church does? For me, I've always had a heart for people. I've always wanted to make people's lives better. I've always had the social work concept of like sticking up for children, sticking up for immigrants, sticking up for people less fortunate than I. And as we started to uncover what most churches actually do, where it's very self-absorbed, we started realizing like maybe that's nothing we would want to be a part of. And so that was kind of a straw on the camel's back or whatever, where it was like, okay, well, if our calling was to be a pastor, but now we're not sure we even believe that church is doing any good, how do we fit into the world now? Because I thought that was the calling of God on our lives.
Yeah, you expressed that really well in your chapter, and I really felt for that, because some really difficult times happened for you on there, and Hawaii didn't turn out to be the paradise that you hoped it would be. So that must have been really difficult for you. But I don't want to spoil all the chapter. Go and buy the book, listeners. Please just buy the book. Support the charity that we're supporting. The book. Support all the authors. Support what it is that we're trying to achieve here with the book. So I won't give all the details here, but you do have this moment in the book where the two of you and your husband, are clearly thinking similar things, but it's not apparent to each other that that's what's going on. And you tell it very much from your side. And there's a moment in the book where you express in very few words what was obvious, enormous relief. And I'm fairly sure that you go through it in more detail in your book. But I think what the beautiful bit that I got out of that was that your husband was clearly on the same page. And I think that's beautiful for the two of you. So he was offered this job and he decided that it wasn't the right job for him. It wasn't the right job for your family. So what happened next from that? Because that was clearly a very brave decision to make in that moment.
Yeah, it was it was very much the shaking of our faith, because it was okay, this is what God wants us to do. This is who we're supposed to be. It was very much part of my identity of my calling is to be this. So this is who I am lining myself up to become. So, I mean, since young, very young, that was the core of my identity, was that I was called to work inside, be in the church, be a pastor, be a pastor's wife, raise good, holy children. And when I realized I don't actually want to be the thing that I've been striving to be, there was a part of it where it was like, wait, my wants get to matter. That's a new thought. And also the like, well, if this isn't who I am, then who am I? And do I have a say in who I am? Because before that moment, it was very much like prophetic word, Bible reading, like it all just tells me I'm supposed to learn what it is, but I don't get to create it, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And you describe in the book how the immense relief for you in doing that. Was it the same emotion and same emotional response for your husband? Was it relief, or was it him making a conscious decision that this is just not the right decision for me?
I feel like that's one of those things that we probably would have to have another discussion about. Right. I'm not sure how he felt in that moment. I think that there was some level of relief. I know he has said now that we're both not Christians, that he's like really happy that he didn't take it and then have his faith fall away while being a pastor. That would be a lot more confusing. But his initial feeling, I honestly don't know. I'd have to ask him.
Okay. All right then. Well, there you go. Marriage advice from Matthew. Yeah, don't Perfect. Take it. Don't take it, listeners. So that was obviously a marker for a massive change in you as a couple, in you as a family. Presumably you had a couple of children by then at that point in your life?
Yeah, at that point I was pregnant with our first son, so I was on our fourth.
Right. Okay. Those are numbers. I've stopped at one, and so as soon as anyone says they've got more than 2 children, I'm like, whoa, those numbers sound way too big.
Yeah, well, that was definitely part of our fundamental belief, was like that you were supposed to, as a woman, your job is to have lots of babies. I also love the chaos of a big family, so that was one of those teachings that I was like, sure, I'll take that on. Let's have a whole bunch of kids and have a brood.
I'm sure there is. I mean, we're obviously digressing very, very slightly here, but I'm sure, the chaos of a large house with lots of children in it, I can see the appeal of that. And even sitting here now with my little girl who's 20 is away at university at the moment, so there are no children making noise at home. So yes, I can imagine, children running around, the sound of children playing, the sound of children laughing, having fun. It sounds attractive, and when you've only got one, unless they've got friends around, you don't get that. It's very different. You have to get on your knees and you have to be their playmate, and that comes with its own challenges, I can tell you.
I can imagine. So one thing that you talk about in your chapter is the silencing of yourself when you're walking through your deconstructing. Obviously feeling silenced is part of my story, hence Silenced and Eden. Feeling like there are topics that you're not allowed to talk to speak about in the open. And I was intrigued by the part where you try to bring up a conversation with your spouse and then kind of go silent. Do you feel like part of that was Christianity, or like maybe just you personality, or why do you think it was so hard to find your voice?
I think it was personality. I think at that time in my life, I was exploring things scientifically, exploring things cerebrally, and wanted to pick things apart to the minutiae level. And at that time in life, that just wasn't something that my wife was doing. We're obviously still married. She's obviously still a Christian. So I'm obviously not going to say anything negative. So listeners, please do not, I really mean this sincerely, please do not take this as criticism of my wife. I want to be very clear about that. So the way we were thinking these things through, the way we were analysing these issues was different. And so there's probably some fault in mine in that I didn't find the appropriate way to approach the conversation. I didn't initiate the conversation in a way that was attractive to Sarah to continue it. So I'm going to take blame for that. I think if I'd found a more constructive and more productive way to initiate that conversation, it probably would have gone better. Probably the reason why that was because this was all still very new for me. I didn't know where my journey was going to end. I was still processing what was going on. So I was trying to work out what these things meant in my head. And so I described this scenario. You mentioned it earlier, the sleep paralysis, a thing that I thought had been a demonic attack on me years ago. I realized was actually the very natural process of sleep paralysis. Terrifying. If you've had it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, please never have it. But that was a real shift in my perspective in terms of the way I viewed certain Christian things. That gave me permission to doubt and to question the sheer existence of the spiritual realm, especially the demonic spiritual realm, which had been a core of my Christian belief. So I think if I'd managed to find a more constructive way to approach that topic, and because of the raw nature of how I felt there and the fearful nature with how I felt there, because again, to put context on that and the blogs that I'd been reading, every single blog I'd read where one partner had deconverted and the other hadn't, the marriage failed. The attrition rate of marriages in that situation is astonishingly high. And I am so pleased that we've managed to make it 12, 15 years into that. It has not been an easy road. It is hard on both partners. I do say that in my own chapter. And so I think I just used that as an excuse not to talk about it. So, oh, yeah, I tried. And I think really what I should have done was find a way to constructively talk about it. And I picked on the wrong topic, and I picked it on it at the wrong moment. And so if you have read my chapter or do read my chapter and get to that point and hear what I'm saying, or if you never do, you're just listening to this and you're in a situation where you are a deconstructing partner with somebody who still believes, and you're trying to have those conversations, just try gently, try multiple times, try different tacks, but do try to have that conversation. Don't just try once, go, no, that didn't work, and then not do it again. It's very easy to give into that fear like I did, but it hurts more longer down the line. So do have that conversation and find a way to have it gently. So there's a long-winded answer to your question there, Joe. So I will accept fault on that because I should have made more effort. My wife had no idea what it was that I was going through. She had no idea what it was that I was trying to say. You know, all I was just raising some little thing in her head. And so it's hardly a surprise. She was like, yeah, that doesn't really matter. But for me, it was bigger. It was bigger than it really was. And I didn't make that clear.
I don't know if you noticed, but in my chapter, I have this dialogue between me and my husband where he talks about the difference between spirit. So the word spirit in the Bible, there's verses that are capitalized S and some that aren't. And the knowledge that capitalization is like a new thing. And I talk about how to him, he was trying to explain that the spirit in us and the spirit as in the Holy Spirit, like there's no difference in the biblical term, but in the new translations, they try to make a difference by capitalization. But in that conversation, I kind of just off, like, I'm like, I don't understand what you're getting at. Like, yeah, it's English has changed over years, whatever. And so it was just interesting because to me, those two conversations feel similar in that I didn't understand. I didn't understand the depth of what he was trying to get at. Just like your wife was kind of like, what are you even talking about? But my husband was a very persistent person. And so maybe it is just that personality where I tend to be the meeker, the if you shut me down once, I'm done. I don't know how to try again. And he is the person who like will just not stop until you understand what he's getting at. Be
persistent, I think, and be gentle as well. And I failed on both counts. It's important that we do have these honest conversations. So when you and your husband Joe were navigating these waters, you realized that he was deconstructing? Were you already deconstructing? Were different things triggering you, or was it at different time periods?
So there were things in Christianity that were uncomfortable for me. And he was the one who started vocalizing some of his questions. And even in my story, I bring up that he shares it in a small group. And again, I guess it is that personality where I was mortified that he opened his mouth and shared with other people what I wasn't even comfortable speaking to myself, like the questions and the changes in my faith that I wasn't even comfortable self-acknowledging. He was going to share with a group of friends who were all Christian. So
isn't the house group supposed to be that place where you're safe to do that?
Yes, absolutely. They should be, right? But for us, it was very much, we were both starting that process in different trigger points or different aspects of our beliefs. And it was interesting because there were things where he would question something and I would be like, wait, you can't question that. Like, that's not I'm not ready yet to question if there is a God. Like, that's, whoa. I think his first was like the Bible being factual or literal. I think that was the first one he's brought up and I was very uncomfortable with. And then I brought up the well, then is Jesus more of a fable, or was it like a interesting person who changed things but maybe didn't actually resurrect? Like, maybe that's just a story. And then he was very much like, whoa, you can't question Jesus. Like, Jesus is Jesus. And so it was interesting. We had that back and forth of like, he'd question something and I would be uncomfortable with him questioning that. But then I would look into what he was saying and I'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then I would push it a little farther and he'd be like, oh yeah, I guess we can question Jesus. Okay, this is scary. Yeah. But I very much enjoyed having the partner to process that with. It was, I couldn't imagine the loneliness of doing that completely alone. And even doing it in a partnership still was very scary because you're still losing everyone outside of that partnership.
Yes, of course. Yes, at least you got each other to comfort each other. But yes, there is loss of community still in all of that. The benefit that I have in my situation is my wife is connected to a church full of friends, and we have dinner at friends' houses or we entertain friends. Yes, they're all Christians, but there is still that friends community. And if we'd left that together, we would have to do our own things to try to find new friends because we would have lost all of those people.
Yeah. And that's what Josh and I pretty much experienced, where we were like, okay, well, how do you make friends? We had no idea, because since both of us grew up in the church, like, that was where you find your friends.
Car club.
So it was an interesting thing.
Yes. Car club is a good way.
So my husband did improv comedy in high school, and so he actually found an improv club where we moved and has found some community there. And then I started working with Louder Than Silence and have an amazing community. So we've both found our spots, but it was a couple years of very lonely, not knowing how to make friends as an adult.
So your husband does stand up?
He does improv.
Improv. He goes and does improv.
Yeah, so awesome. Improv comedy is where you take suggestions and then you do like a sketch. So it's a little different than stand up.
Yeah. Is he good at it? Do you go and watch him?
Yeah. That's his hobby. Like, he has a regular job. He doesn't get paid for it, but that is his hobby. He gets on stage twice a month, and he's a lot of fun to watch.
Excellent. And does he practice around the dinner table as well?
Yeah, right now, 2 of our kids have also taken improv classes, so it's become a family affair. Okay,
excellent. I don't quite do improv. I do acting on stage. So everything I do is scripted and memorized to the absolute detail and the absolute step. No improv allowed. If you're improving, you're doing it wrong. So
Perfect.
yeah, in fact, again, quick, I've just got the script for the next play. I mean, I've got it this week, and the play is called "Don't Get Your Vickers in a Twist."
That is a great title. I love it.
It's a great title. And because none of my listeners are ever going to come and watch it, thank goodness. Well, thank goodness for you. I'm going to have a new experience in this play. I've done a couple of weird things on stage over the years in various plays, but this play is going to give me a new experience because the play is set in the 1980s when the UK had its first female vicars. And so there's a female vicar. And because it's actors it's a play with actors as characters in the play and female vicars in the play, my poor character at some point in the play has to come on stage as a female vicar in a short skirt.
Yay. Oh, I love it.
Yes, high heels are mentioned. The thought of that petrifies me. First of all, how am I going to find size 10 high heels? That's problem number one. Problem number two, how do you walk in those monsters? I'm going to end up with 2 legs in plaster by the end of this play.
I'm afraid I won't be any help to you because I never wear heels. I'm like 1-inch heel girl. Like I don't want those big stilettos. But yeah, we'll have the shared.
I think it's going to have to be those.
Yeah. I think we'll have the shared experience of wearing a skirt without shame for the first time. I always was like, I can't wear a short skirt. That's shameful. So now you can understand.
There will definitely be some very thick tights on. I can tell you that. I ain't showing my bare legs.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. It's funny though. You say that in one of the plays I was in last year, I had to wear a military kilt. Yeah, no big deal, you say, it's all right. Then I sat down wearing the kilt, and then I had this realization that I was on a stage and the entirety of the audience was below my knees. And my brain went, this is what it's like to be a woman every day. It's shit, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And I went, oh my God, I have never glued my knees together so tightly ever in my life. Ladies, you have new respect from me, genuinely. I know I'm making a joke out of this, but it is serious. There is a serious point to this. You genuinely have new respect from me.
There is a new awareness, right, of where you're putting your body parts and who is noticing what parts of your body are showing. That females have that's a constant for us. We're always aware of what's exposed, how I'm putting my body, and who's looking at it. So a good little taste of what it's like to be a girl.
Let's stick with that for a moment. That was uncomfortable at times. Yes, I was in a play, and yes, it was comedy and all that, but I was very conscious of that, and I was doing that while trying to act, while trying to look engaged. And so all of this was being done in real time with me reciting memory lines, me looking for the cue, waiting for the cue for my lines, waiting for the next move I was going to do, trying to look attentive like I was on stage. And all the time my brain was going, wear your knees, cross your ankles, watch your knees, don't open your knees, keep your knees together, Matthew. And it was wearing, it was genuinely draining. And I came off stage and I said jokingly to a couple of people, I've got a new appreciation of what it's like to be a woman, but I was actually being really serious. And the thought of having to do that day in, day out, at work, on the train, at a restaurant, at home, with older relatives, it must be terrible.
Yeah, and it starts at like 12, 13, where you start to have your body change, and you all of a sudden aren't just a kid being crazy, but you're told, like, keep your legs together, keep your skirt down, don't lift your hands up if your belly shows. Like, starts really young.
Yeah. I have not fully processed what that must be like. And to be honest, I don't think I'm capable of fully processing that one. So, men, if you have no idea what it's like, try acting. You'll eventually get exposed to a little taster of what it might be. Or just go out in public in a short skirt.
There you go. Go on a walk down not well lit street and see how safe you feel in a miniskirt.
Yeah. Yes. That is something I'm incapable of comprehending, Joe. And I think it's important that us men do something that exposes us to the discomfort that others who are not us experience, even if it's only for a fleeting moment, because maybe that fleeting moment will help us appreciate enough so that we do something about it or try to make others aware of it. Because again, we've jested about it, but on the serious point, since that experience on stage, I do try to be a little bit more attentive to what's going on. And I have noticed that sometimes women are very conscious if they've got a short skirt. I have noticed a bit more that sometimes women can be very conscientious when they're wearing a short skirt. So I try just not to be in a place where I'm creating an unnecessary problem. If there's a woman sitting at a bench in the pub and she's got a short skirt on, don't sit opposite her. Little things like that can actually make life a little bit easier. Go and sit to the side or behind so that she knows that you're not there for a cheap look. It's little things like that actually can make a bit of a difference. And that's made me aware of that kind of behavior. I'm sorry, ladies, that it's taken me so long to get there, but sometimes we just need to experience it in an uncomfortable way to know what it's like.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, at one point you had mentioned the being a white male, a cis male. And also, so one thing I realized growing up the way I grew up was the ingrained homophobia.
Yeah.
There's so many biases that we don't notice we have. You mentioned it as a missionary's kid where you don't see the fact that there's this classism with whites and the natives, right, in Africa. And it seems all normal. And then as an adult, you go, whoa, wait.
Yes.
And so one thing I realized was the ingrained homophobia in my upbringing and my culture. And so last year I set out to read LGBTQIA books, authors, so I could just have that little taste of what do they experience. Because if you don't purpose to see the world from their view, you will never see the biases that you have in you.
Yes.
You will never notice the things that you don't notice, right? So you won't notice how a woman's body language changes when she's wearing a skirt, unless you put on a skirt.
Yeah. Yes.
So for me, I didn't really understand what it might feel like to be trans. And then I read people's stories of body dysphoria, and I'm like, oh, I've had my own mental illness issues. I can relate to some of this just enough to be more conscious of the pronouns that they would like me to use and then do it.
Yes. Yeah. Representation is very important. And if we don't expose ourselves to some representation, we cannot know what it's like. Just as an aside, I was listening to a podcast only this week about the scientific ways to cure racism. And the answer was very simple. Have a mixed culture. Be in your circle of friends, in where you work, just be exposed to people who are different to you. And those people who are in an environment where they're coming across people who are not of the same skin color as them and seeing them as just normal people, it makes a difference to their attitude to those people. And if you're stuck in your white racist village doing your white racist things, and then suddenly this strange colored person comes through, you're going to be obnoxious to them because you don't know any better. So expose yourselves to these things and make yourself and everybody else around you better people for it. So that's a great idea, Joe, reading books like that. If you have any recommendations I can throw in my show notes, chuck them at me, and we can stick some in the show notes for people to go and read. good. I'm not aware that I've actually, to be fair, I don't read very many books anyway, but even so, I'm not aware that I've read any books by anybody who is in the LGBT community or features prominent LGBT characters, and that's something I probably need to address. I have consumed media in other ways, but why not make it a book as well?
Yeah, for me, obviously, books are like important. I decided to publish my book because part of my deconstructing was reading memoirs of people who have left cults. That was like my obsession as I left religion. And so once, I consumed a lot of memoirs, I was like, okay, well, how do I branch out from just the cult ones? And so that's why I decided to do LGBTQ. And yeah, the Inverse Cowgirl, an intersex female who her story was amazing. I'm blanking on Pidgeon's book, but I'll send that to you. But yeah, two that come to mind are intersex. And I wasn't even aware at that time, I'm sad to say, of my ignorance, but I wasn't even aware of intersex people, unaware, uneducated. So much of my education was Christianese, the bubble, right?
Yeah.
I was homeschooled off and on. I remember vividly when I was going to public school when evolution was taught, and my dad would make me come home and watch young Earth scientists disprove whatever they were teaching at school.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah. I can imagine that being quite difficult. Have you had any conversations with your dad about that since?
My dad and I's relationship has had to shift as I have shifted. And he's still a believer. I would assume he's still a young Earth believer. And so there are certain topics that I just aren't worth the effort. So that is not a conversation that we've had. The last couple times we've seen each other, there's been a lot of healing in just respecting each other's ability to believe what they want, what works for him and what works for me, and starting to respect that they don't have to be the same.
And is he still in Hawaii, or did he leave Hawaii when you guys left?
No, my parents and two of my sisters are still in Hawaii. So we now have quite a long ways between us because I actually relocated to the East Coast. So now we're way too far away. But yeah, they're still enjoying the big waves and the sunshine.
Does your husband miss it?
Oh, yes.
Does he?
Absolutely.
So, but you've got an excuse to go back on a regular basis, though.
Yes, a good reason to go visit.
Excellent. So you left Hawaii. The two of you ended up on the East Coast. Was that part of your deconstruction experience, or was it something that was likely to happen anyway?
Well, it's interesting. I think it helped. It wasn't because of deconstructing, but I definitely think it helped us have the room to deconstruct.
Right.
When we were in Hawaii, everybody we knew was all the church that we attended. And so it's really convenient to move and then just not get around to finding a church.
Yeah. It's a great way to avoid going to church. Yeah, you just relocate and go, oh, damn, I forgot to do that.
Yeah, I never got around to that. Darn. So they correlated, but they weren't because of each other. So it was kind of interesting.
Okay. Do you think it helped?
Yes, it definitely helped. It definitely made it easy. It helped with the kids, too, because they had friends and they only saw each other at church, right? And so taking those friends away would have been hard to explain to them, but moving made it, they had a really good reason to not be able to see those friends. They were an ocean away.
Yeah. Do they have much memories of church, and do they miss that at all? Was there some explaining you had to do on that?
Again, because of the circumstances of life, there wasn't a lot of explaining that needed to happen. We started having conversations with them about how different people have different beliefs, and that was okay. And kind of broadening our narrative of the world around them. It's interesting. So my husband, this last Christmas, actually, my husband said he missed Christmas carols. And he was like, what if we go to like a mass or like a Christmas Eve service? I just want like the candlelight service. And I was like, okay, well, I'm open to that as long as it's not like an intense preaching. Like, let's see what I can handle. I don't know. And so he pitched it to the kids. He's like, do you guys want to go to church? And all of them were, no, that's boring. We don't want to.
Wow.
Wow. I wouldn't say they miss it.
No, that's quite funny. My daughter was a young teen when she popped the question to me, because it was after we moved, and my wife's obviously still going to church and I'm clearly not. And we've relocated. She's 10-ish thereabouts, so maybe not even a teenager. And she said, Dad, why don't you come to church anymore? I'm like, oh shit, it's happened. Because I knew my daughter, I knew the question would come. And I knew I'd known for at least a year that eventually she's going to ask me this question. And I'm going to need to have an answer to it. And none of the words that I'd thought to myself came to me in that moment. So I kind of stumbled through it. But it was awkward. That was difficult and awkward for me, because she was going to church with her mum every Sunday. So I couldn't say, because Christianity is a horrible, rotten thing that's going to poison your mind. You know, I can't say something like that. No, that's not the answer. So, I had to say, something along the lines of, I'm unable to believe it anymore, in a way that doesn't make it seem negative, because then that runs the risk of hurting our relationship and the relationship with her mum, and that all sorts of horribleness comes out from that. So, I built it up into my head. I think I got through it, but none of what I'd rehearsed to myself came out in that moment.
It seems like it would be a really complicated dance that you would have to do. I had an interesting situation with my 6-year-old. He's going to public school right now. And where we live, there's a lot of Christian, Bible Belt type. And he tells me that his friend at school says that Christmas is Jesus or God's, is God's birthday.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, some people believe that Christmas is God's birthday. But before Christianity claimed Christmas, it was actually winter solstice. And I go on this history lesson. He's only 6, okay? So I don't think I was really thinking through.
But
I do a mini history
celebration around those days. Yes. It's just changed lots over the years.
Right. So I go through a little history lesson of the way that traditions have changed. And again, he's 6. So I don't think I really took a second to think about my audience at that time. And so I get done with my long spiel, and he goes, yeah, but so-and-so says that it's God's birthday, so I believe him. I'm like, oh, all right. Yeah. Well, great.
The beautiful naivety of youngsters. Yeah. There are some Christians that actually try to argue that Christmas Day is genuinely Jesus's birthday, that the whole Bethlehem story actually happened at that time. And it's something peculiar to do with 9 months before his march, and so conception was around about Passover or something like that. So yeah, if those are the hoops that you want to jump through, go right ahead. I'm fairly sure that history is not on your side, but if that's what you need to do, knock yourself out. I'm just going to sit here, drink my lovely cider and laugh at you.
Yeah, see, I was lucky enough that one my dad didn't believe. He was like, yeah, no, Christmas is the day that we chose to celebrate Jesus's birthday. Yeah. And that's a little bit easier to swallow.
Yes, I'm so glad that I was never on that road as well. I think it's a relatively modern thing. I could be wrong, but my impression is it's a relatively modern thing. But oh, am I so glad that I was never at that end.
Yeah.
So you and your husband are working happily now in secular work, obviously doing fabulous things. He's entertaining people, you're helping people. Do you know what the hopes and dreams of your children are? Is that something you're allowed to say on this podcast?
I actually went to breakfast with my 11-year-old and asked her if she's thought about what she wants to go to college for and what, and she's like, I don't know yet. But very much I try to foster their independence, their ability to make their own choices, to figure out who they are and what they want to be and do in the world. To the thing about my 6-year-old son, like, I'm like, okay, if you want to believe in the Christian God or a God, totally fine. I'm open to you figuring out and painting the world as fits best for you.
Yeah. And things change. My daughter, throughout the latter half of her teens, was always big into volcanoes. She wanted to do work on volcanoes. She wanted to be a volcanologist. And then when she went to university and started doing it, she came back and said, you know what? Nah, I think I'm done. I think volcanoes isn't really my thing. And so she changed course. So she did a year of doing volcanoes at university, and now she's switched and started again. I thought, okay, fine. You had a good enough relationship with me, with your parents, that you could have that conversation. And we had a good enough relationship with her that we were able to support her through that. And that's the best we can do as parents. And I'm so pleased that she had that freedom and that confidence to be able to do that, because it would have broken my heart if she'd struggled through the course, not enjoying it, not got the grade she wanted because she wasn't enjoying it, and then struggled to find employment and had felt that she'd wasted 3 years, because that would have been worse for everybody.
Absolutely. And that ability you can change your mind even when you start taking steps towards something, that is beautiful. That's something I have struggled. Like, I've always had that thought of like, well, once you commit to something, then you're committed and you're going to do it. Yeah. It's been a process of me learning, like, no, I get to change my mind. That's okay. It's okay to change course.
Yes, it's fine. And I think there's something beautiful about deconstruction in that it gives us permission to change. Let's drag something, because it's very easy to get into this whirlpool of how awful and of how terrible and how fearful and how painful the deconstruction process can be. And the termination of that deconstruction process isn't the end of the pain. You now need to navigate a new life, and that has its own challenges and its own loneliness. So let's look at some of the positives and the benefits of that. And that freedom to change our mind and to look at things differently is something that we should grasp. And let's see that it's not a failure to realize that you're doing something that's not right for you and you need to move on. That is a success point. It's not a failure point. We need to get out of that mindset of thinking and be kind and be gracious to ourselves.
And the thing that's beautiful is once you let go of this is who I have to be, or this is the shoulds, this is the way the world looks, then you get to start defining it for yourself. I remember having this conversation with a fellow friend who had deconstructed years before me. And he was like, well, the beautiful thing is that once you let go of the narrative of who you have to be, you get to decide who you want to be.
Yes, absolutely. Am I allowed to say amen to that? We need a new word. We need an atheist word for that. Because
that is hard.
Doesn't seem strong enough,
Right.
Amen just gets the meaning across for what we want. We need to own a new expression for that. So Joe, let's get back onto the book and writing and chapter writing. So, because of course we're talking about apostate stories of deconversion and the support of that, and Joe's books, Silence in Eden, and obviously Louder Than Silence, the fantastic charity that's attached to that. So Joe, how did you find out about the Apostate Book project? What made you want to get on board with that?
Yeah. So when I first published my book, Silence in Eden, I started looking at podcasts and the deconstruction sphere to kind of put it out there.
Because you want to plug your book and get out there and get your voice out there, you know, like every other author.
Right, as you should. And so I went on the Graceful Atheist podcast. That was the first podcast I ever did. And so then I found the Deconversion Anonymous group through doing that. And it was interesting because I am not on Facebook all that often. I rarely look on there. I'm not like some people who are on there often. And I came across one of Sarah's posts, and she at that point already had a good amount of stories. And she was saying, oh, I'm gonna, the deadline to get your story in has been postponed. So if you haven't submitted yet, submit. And it was the first time I had heard of it. And so I was like, oh, can I get on board? What is this? Tell me, please.
Too many people having fun. I need to be there with them as well. Absolutely. And incidentally, listeners, I'm going to try and find Joe's episode of The Graceful Atheist, so you don't need to go searching for yourself. Show notes, you know the drill by now. Everything that's important in the show is in the show notes. That's what they're there for, so check them.
Thank you for doing that. That would be great. I definitely remember being a lot more nervous, so hopefully it's worth listening to. But yeah, so I saw Sarah's post and I was like, well, this would be, first of all, fun because I like writing and would be a great way to plug my book. And so she was great. She was like, yeah, go ahead, send it to me. I think I had like 2 weeks to put my chapter together in regular fashion. I waited until like the 2 days before and then freaked out and got it all finished.
You're not ADHD by any chance.
No, what's funny is that we now think I am. My husband is, and they say men are a lot easier to diagnose because they have more of the typical signs. As I have started therapy, become more aware of the way that I interact with the world, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm most likely ADHD. That makes a lot of sense. So yes, I was very ADHD about putting in my chapter, and I loved the experience of writing. I loved working with Sarah. She was really easy to communicate with, very easy and very gracious with her like notes. She was like, this is how I would do it. You can say yes, you can say no, you can add something else. So it was really great working with her. At one point she mentioned like maybe we'll do another book for another group of stories. I think that would be amazing because I think she definitely has a gifting for this. And
there's people out there, Apostate 2 in a couple of years' time, then 3 a couple of years after that. And this could keep going, and I hope it does.
I really hope it does. I think it would be beautiful. I think the process of writing is healing for those doing it, and I think the ability to read it will be healing for those who need it.
Yes, absolutely. So was that why you got on board?
Yeah, I got on board because I believe in something like this. Like I said, it was like, hey, this would be a great way to plug my book, and I wanted an excuse to write more.
Yeah, absolutely. And with your previous book, I can't remember what you said about that. Did that go through a formal editing process, or is it fully self-published? So
my sister is an English teacher for over a decade and worked as my editor tirelessly and underpaid. But siblings, I did have
always there to be abused. Bless them.
Yes, bless them very much. She also was a lot of help emotionally when I was processing the childhood stuff. So I don't know if I would have survived the last 6 years without her emotionally, and the book definitely would have never come to be without her expertise and brain.
And is your sister a believer still, or is she deconstructed as well?
She is not.
Okay.
She and I had a similar journey, and she was about 10 years. She deconstructed about 10 years before I did, but much like you, didn't really talk about it. Nobody in the family really knew what was going on. She just kind of pulled away. And so I think I hope that the process of being able for me to talk about it with her was
so she
healing
did it all
for
on
her.
Her own.
Yes.
Right. So when did you realize
it was interesting. So she kind of pulled back. She actually went through a crappy divorce that kind of shook everything for her. And so she pulled back, and it was just evident by the way she was living that things had changed. But she definitely wasn't at the point where she was wanting to talk about the spiritual aspect of it and the emotional aspect of it. And I definitely didn't push, didn't ask. I knew she was going through things, and let her come to me when she was ready, which she didn't really do for a long time. But then when I started deconstructing, I reached out to her to be like, hey, this is where I'm at. Did you go through this? And I think that there was a level of healing for her for having me bring it all back up and her be able to like feel like she was processing it again with someone, because she did it all herself before.
Yeah. That's probably a very validating experience for both of you, I imagine.
Yeah, it was definitely, like I said, I don't think I would have survived the process without her.
Yeah, bless siblings. So Sarah edited your chapter. So what was it like then having somebody different editing your words and putting them together?
I think it was good in the fact that with my sister, she like knew what I was talking about. With Sarah, she was able to be like, wait, this isn't very clear. I don't know what you're talking about here. So let's explain this, because I had my book took 4 years and an entire year of editing. So I had the painful process of somebody being like, yeah, you don't say this well, or red penning your words. I had already had that happen so much that I was prepared for Sarah's very sweet little tweaks.
That's a very good way of describing the processing, the editing experience under Sarah. That's glorious. I love the way you expressed that. It was, for me, because I'd never gone through this before. You know, all the previous writing I'd done is either my notes for when I do a show here, or the blog that I had, which of course nobody edits. You know, when I go and read some of the posts I put up on the blog, I go, oh, wow, I didn't do a very good editing job myself, did I? In fact, I'm fairly sure quite a lot of my blog posts, I literally just typed them and posted them. I didn't even type and read it, which is mistake number one. You know, always type, then read, then post.
One thing, as I've been for Louder Than Silence, I just started doing a writing group. And one of the things I tell all of them is, once you do your first draft, read it, fix the things that you see, and then read it out loud. Yes. There are things that you will not catch while reading it in your head that you will catch when reading it out loud. So for anybody out there who posts stuff, that is my recommendation. Read it out loud, hear yourself say the words, and you will see things that need to be fixed.
Yeah, that is a very, very good tip. I've actually used that a couple of times at work. I've had to do a presentation. I prep my script. I put hours into prepping my script. And then I stand up in my little office at home and I say it out loud, or I go to the living room and I say it out loud, because you then start to find the little bits that you stumble over that you don't notice when you're reading silently, because your brain just goes through the words and puts them in the right order. It's only when you actually read it out loud that you find those bits. You go, oh yeah, that phrasing doesn't really work, does it?
Exactly.
Yeah, very good tip there, Joe. And well, I'm glad you got on board. I did enjoy reading your chapter. And coming up soon, we're recording it on the last day of January. This will go out in March. So by the time this has been published, we will have already received, I hope, the audio version of the book as well, which we're going to get read by the lovely Sarah's voice. So I get to hear my story read in an Australian accent. I mean, how much more awesome is that?
I was kind of happy when she said she was going to do her regular voice, because it will be very interesting to hear it with a different accent.
Yes, I'm looking. I have a little bit of trepidation about hearing somebody else reading my words. That's going to be very definitely a new experience for me. So there's a little bit of nervous there, but I am also genuinely looking forward to that. Because when we first got on board with this project and people started floating the idea of an audio book, I was thinking, yeah, all those different voices reading those stories out. And I thought maybe I could get one of the other guys to read my story. That could be quite interesting, etc. And then Sarah said, no, I'll read the whole story, the whole book. I thought, Oh, yeah. Really? Really? No, that won't work. Oh, actually, you know what? There's a consistency there that probably works.
Right.
So I think on balance, it's the right choice. And getting people to do it, not everybody will have the right equipment in their office, and there'll be some ambient noise in the background on some. And I think that will be frustrating to switch between.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
it's better that it has a consistent voice and a consistent audio quality all the way through. Yeah, if we could have all got together to a recording booth and read our chapters in the same environment, that might have been different. But we're all over the world, all over America. That really wasn't going to be practical to work.
No, not at all. And I do think that there will be some level of, ease to listen to the same voice. I think it may have gotten a little like noisy to have multiple different voices going on. So I think it'll be beautiful. I know she has such a respect for everyone's story, but I know that she will do a wonderful job, and I'm definitely looking forward to hearing it.
And what I loved about Sarah and her attitude to this project, because for context, listeners, I said we're recording this in the last day in January. It was only a week ago we were all on a group call celebrating the official launch of the book. The book was launched on the 6th of January. A week ago, 20-something of January, one of the authors arranged us all to have a group together, and it was great. We had about 14, I think, of the 21 authors together on a screen and talking together for about an hour and a half. It was brilliant. It was great. And Sarah, when she was talking to some of us, she brought out bits of our story. It was like she'd prepared. She brought out little bits of people's stories and themes from people's stories and brought it into the conversation. And it was lovely. And I really appreciated that Sarah had made that effort.
Yeah, no, she did a wonderful job. You could tell she definitely has been familiar, right? I can only imagine how many times she has read each person's story.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could tell that she has an honor and respect for everybody's story, which is really cool.
Yes, cool. And the other reason why I think she's the right choice is, as I said earlier, I still can't read my story without tears.
Yep.
So, let's see what her words do to me. Thank you so much, Jo. I've really enjoyed the last 2 hours. We've had a great chat together. Is there anything that you're itching to get out that I really should have asked you about?
If you have experienced sexual violence, Louder Than Silence does cohorts. So we do workshops for victims. It's completely free. We know that survivors have paid enough, so we do not ask you to pay for our services. So that is there for anybody who is listening, who has experienced that and is ready to join a group and talk about what they've gone through. One thing that the book is us coming together and saying, here are our shared experiences. There's a healing that happens with validating what we've all been through. And that is what Louder Than Silence believes in. They believe that coming together, sharing each other's voice, spending time in the shared uncomfortable experience that we've all had helps us feel more seen. So it's definitely something I believe in. And it does have that same human to human aspect. Whereas humans, I think we have the power to harm each other, but as humans, we have the power to heal each other as well.
Thank you so much, Jo. Link in the show notes, of course. Please do go and support Louder Than Silence. And Jo, if there are people who are physically too far away from where you are over in America or from the offices of Louder Than Silence, do you have contacts and affiliates to other parts of the States if they were to get in touch with you?
So right now we just do it on Zoom. So we do have people who are outside of the U.S. that come. Obviously, the time zone may make that a little complicated, but I don't have resources outside of that currently.
But there probably are similar organizations spattered around.
Yes, I'm definitely certain there are. I believe RAINN is national. I'm trying to think of some of the ones. I do know that we do have a resource page on Louder Than Silence, but again, I'm not sure how many would be international resources.
Right, okay. It's probably difficult or impossible even to make it an exhaustive list, but it's probably a good place to start. And I think that idea of Zoom calls sounds really good, sounds really useful, sounds really practical, a great positive use of our technology.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you so much, Jo. I knew that we were going to have a fun chat. Thank you for living up to my expectations. Not that there was any pressure anyway. So all that is left now then is my usual question to most of my guests at the end of every interview is, do you have a favorite Bible character and who are they?
So it was interesting sitting with this question, because one of the things I point out in one of the things I point out in Silence in Eden is that as a female, so many of the Christian characters are male. Mm-hmm. We really don't have a whole lot of female characters. And so I share this story of Esther. When I was a little kid, she was one of the few female characters that we were like, hey, she's kind of a badass, yeah. Right? So let's enjoy that. So we used to dress up. We would do a whole wedding ceremony thing, and her getting ready, and then her going to Malachi, and asking for him to have the children of Israel pray, the whole thing. I remember vividly what exact dress we would use to be the princess. And in my book, I point out that, but the power lied in the king. King was the one who had all the power. So everybody in my family, because I'm one of 4 girls, so all girls. So everybody wants to be Esther, right? Nobody wants to play the king. No one wants to be the bad guy. And so I would always want to be the king, because I wanted to be the one who had the final say in what actually happened. I wanted to be the one with the power. And so it's interesting because most of my life, though, has been Esther, where I only have so much power, I only have so much say, but I also have a heart to save people. So I'm going to say Esther.
Thank you, Jo. And I think that's fitting. And yes, you definitely do have that heart. Listeners, Silence in Eden, that's the book. Louder Than Science, that is the charity that is supported by it. And don't forget, while you're doing that, Apostate Stories of Deconversion. And until next time, listeners, don't be silent. Thank you so much, Jo. You have been listening to a podcast from Reason Press. Do you have any thoughts on what you've just heard? Do you have a topic that you would like us to cover? Please send all feedback to reasonpress@gmail.com. You might even appear on an episode. Our theme music was written for us by Holly. To hear more of her music, see the links in our show notes.